Great to have everybody with us as we continue our learning together. Let me just begin by announcing the sponsor of the Shir, the Eloi Nishmas Miriam Bas Avram Alav Shalom V'Shem Tov Ben Shlomo Zichrono Livracha. Okay, so we are studying the a great work of Rav Kook, the Midot Haraya, which are the character traits and what I would call a Musar work, a work in which we are thinking about our conduct, our behavior, our midot, our character, and learning from Rav Kook. And the goal of the class is to learn the ideas, but also to bring them into our lives as well. And we've been looking at the very first section, but this is a standalone class. We looked at the opening section is about Ahavat, it's about love. And Rav Kook speaks about love of Hashem. And what we're going to look at today is the topic of Ahavat Yisrael, the love of our fellow Jew, which is such an important topic in general and very important in the thought of Rav Kook and in the life of Rav Kook. I do want to begin with just the following few words about a great loss that we had in the OU community, which many of you are familiar with, and that is Rabbi Moshe Hauer, Zecher Tzaddik Livracha. He was the executive vice president of the Orthodox Union. He passed away suddenly on Shmini Atzeres. The funeral was here in Yerushalayim on Erev Shabbos, this past Erev Shabbos. And they're still sitting Shiva, the family is sitting Shiva. He was quite a remarkable person, a great Talmud Chacham. And I've listened to a number of the Hespedim eulogies, and I was there at the funeral here in Yerushalayim and listening the funeral in Baltimore, and there were Hespedim that were given here in Yerushalayim at the OU Center, the OU in New York. And one of the major themes that everybody spoke about regarding his personality was this idea of Ahavat Yisrael, the love that he had for Jews and the love that he had for all Jews. And this is going to be a major theme of our learning today and a major theme in the teaching of Rav Kook. When I went to the funeral on Friday, so I had the schus of taking Rabbi Weinreb, Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch Weinreb, who was the executive director, the executive vice president, of the Orthodox Union many years ago. They had a very close relationship. They were both rabbis in Baltimore. And during that ride, the trip to the cemetery, so he told me the following story, that Rabbi Hauer, he was a rabbi in Baltimore. They were both rabbis in Baltimore. And when Rabin was assassinated here in Israel at that time, so there was a major gathering that was to take place in a conservative synagogue, and in a tribute to Rabin, and also to give eulogies and whatever it may be. And there was a whole question at that time, the Baltimore, I'm not sure if anybody here is familiar with the Baltimore community, but there is a very strong influence of Ner Yisrael, of the yeshiva community. And for the most part, they were not really supportive of getting together, of a gathering in a conservative synagogue, really a whole question of entering a conservative synagogue. And so Rabbi Hauer was a rabbi at the time. He was a Talmud. He was a student of the Ner Yisrael yeshiva, and considered to be one of the great students. The position of the yeshiva really was not to attend and really not to take part in that event. And Rabbi Hauer at that time had to make a decision if he was going to be a part of it. And his decision was that he was going to be at that event. And he felt, even though it was in a conservative synagogue, but for the sake of Achdus and for the sake of community, that we need to be together and that the Orthodox community needs to be there as well. And even what we might call the black hat community needs to take part. And that was not an easy decision for him. But and Rabbi Weinreb mentioned that, and that was very much emblematic of his life and of his life work, especially as he entered the leadership of the OU, how important it was for him to bring the Jewish community together and to see every Jew as a Jew and to see the sanctity in every Jew. And so I think that's a beautiful way to lead into our learning this morning, which is one of the themes of Rav Kook and the teachings of Rav Kook. And let's begin with the following. I want to begin, and you can look at page 1, with the following pasuk. And I think this is a good place to start when we speak about loving others and seeing the best in others. It's a pasuk that's found in Parsha Kedoshim Vayikra. And essentially, when you first read the pasuk, it seems to be a pasuk that's referring to a court and talking about judges. Lo ta'asu avel b'mishpat, that when a judge is when he's in judgment of a court case, he should not do avel. He should not do something that's sinful, something that's unethical. Lo tisa p'nei dal. You shouldn't give a preference to somebody who is poor. V'lo tehadar p'nei gadol. And you also shouldn't give preference to somebody who is a gadol, somebody who might be wealthy, somebody who's influential in the community. So it seems to be that there's a reference to a judge and how a judge is to judge a case. But tzedek tishpot amitecha, with righteousness you shall give judgment when it comes to your people. Amitecha. That is the pasuk. That's the pasuk in the Torah, Parsha Kedoshim. Rashi says the following. Rashi says, "V'tzedek tishpot amitecha." You have that right, the source right in the middle at the very top. Kim mashma'o. Rashi says, well, it's as it sounds. In other words, that when it comes to judging a case, make sure that you're judging it ethically, that you're not favoring any side. That's what it means, b'tzedek tishpot amitecha. But then Rashi offers another interpretation. Davar acher, hevedan et chavercha lekafschus. So here, this is a phrase that I think many of us are familiar with, and familiar with it from Pirkei Avos. Hevedan es kol adam lekafschus. Here the language of Rashi is hevedan es chavercha lekafschus. And what does that mean? That you should give the benefit of the doubt when you're judging somebody else. And here Rashi says that this pasuk is not only referring to a court case, and it's not only referring to judges. That's one way of reading the pasuk. But Rashi says this applies to every single person, to every individual. When it comes to judging somebody else, let's judge in an open-hearted way. Let's judge where we give the benefit of the doubt to somebody else. I open with that because I think that's interesting to see that in a pasuk and to see that as a mitzvah of the Torah. That I think we generally think about this idea as as a nice thing to do, or going beyond the letter of the law to judge somebody favorably. But according to Rashi, that's the meaning of this pasuk. In other words, this is basic, this is foundational, that whenever we're judging somebody else, hevedan et chavercha lekafschus. Right? Make sure that you're looking with a good eye, that you're judging in a favorable way. So I think that's an important place to start, to see that not as, you're not being a tzaddik when you're doing that, or a tzaddikis, you're doing the right thing, you're doing that which is obligated by the Torah. And we'll come back to that pasuk in a few moments. So now I want to enter the writings of Rav Kook. This is the work that we're going to be looking at over the year, Bezrat Hashem. It's a sefer called Midot Haraya. And in the sefer, Rav Kook has 18 different sections where he talks about 18 different midot, different character traits. And as I said a few moments ago, as we're studying this, the idea is not only that we're studying it as theory, but we want to study it as practice as well. Like how to bring this idea of loving others and judging favorably to others, how to bring that into our daily life. So this is from Midot Haraya. It's number 3, right in the middle of the page, the section Ahavat, and this is what Rav Kook writes. It's the 9th piece of this section. And again, the theme here is Rav Kook speaking about the way that we think about others, the way we judge others, and how to do that in a positive way. Adam nishchat, somebody who is a lowly or a sinful person, ra'ui lisnoto, he says it's appropriate to hate that person, but again, actually I've translated that wrong. Not to hate the person, rak mitzad chesrono, only to hate the fault or the lacking in that person. Aval mitzad etzem tselem elokim shelo, but the very essence of the tselem elokim, that the person has the image of God within them, ra'ui lahokiro be'ava, you should appreciate that person with a great amount of love. So we have to somehow make that bifurcation. In other words, there is what to hate, but that we have to identify that precisely, what it is that is to be hated, to be disliked. But the person himself, right, or herself, that person of the Tzelem Elokim, that needs to be appreciated and to be loved. Loki Rabbi Ava. And Rav Kook continues, Gam leda'at shemitziut yikrat erko hi yoter atzmit lo, that you need to know that the preciousness of the true essence of that person, the true essence of that person is goodness. Mimitziut mikurav habachutim, right? That's the essence of that person is really goodness, and you should see those other faults as secondary. And he writes the following, Al Kain, and here he quotes a very interesting source from the Gemara, from the Talmud. Al kain kri'at am ha'aretz. If you need to rip apart an am ha'aretz, somebody who is ignorant, in other words, if you want to find fault, if you want to highlight the fault in that person, okay, you have to do it kidag. You have to do it the way that one opens up a fish. That's what he's quoting a Gemara. Hidavka migabo, that you open up the fish from the outer side, velo mitzad panav, but not from literally the face or the inner part of the fish. Shebahem or Hatzelam. There you will find the light of the Tzelem Elokim. In other words, when we see, and what is he referring to? He's referring to the idea that what those actions are external, and we should see them as external to the person. What we need to appreciate is the essence of the person, the potential of the person, and that's the Tzelem Elokim that's found in every individual. Okay, so that is Rav Kook's statement. Yes, please.
I'm very legalistic about this.
Yeah.
Opening the fish from the back, because that's where the spine is.
Yeah.
And you want to remove the bone so that you can enjoy the meat of the fish.
Okay, nice. Yeah, very nice. Very nice. Very nice. Please.
Are we only talking about some people that we know, or is it like, does that go for everybody? Like I have Senoir in my mind.
Right. 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 I think you make a good point. I would say that this is the general approach to people, to Jews, to people we know, to people in general. And then there are more extreme examples, right? Extreme examples of what would fall into like a category of Amalek, where we don't necessarily have, this approach, where there's pure evil and that evil has been cancerous, it's spread through the body, and that becomes the very essence. So that is an exception. I would say that Rav Kook would agree that is an exception, but those are the outliers. We're talking about in general the way that we see one another, the way that we see our fellow Jew, the way that we see Reformed Jew, a conservative Jew, as we mentioned, Rabbi Haraya, the idea of entering a conservative synagogue, right? To see the Tzelem Elokim, to see the goodness, and we can disagree on certain points. We can remove, okay, that's the mashal of the dog. Okay, so you have this outer part, that's the external. We can talk about that. There might be real differences there, but we also need to appreciate what it is that we share in common and to see that Tzelem Elokim within every individual. Okay, and again, as you point out, there may be, and I think there are exceptions to this rule. Rav Kook writes the following, just to kind of expand and to elucidate this idea, and we'll see the bottom source right now on page 1. This is a very interesting book, which is called Hasanigoria b'Mishnata Rav Kook. An author by the name of Rabbi Yamin Efrati, he has a whole sefer, an entire book, that's all about what Sanigoria means, a defender. That Rav Kook is the defender of Yisrael. And we have this idea from Rav Levi Yitzchak Barditchev. He was also known as the Sanigoria, that he defended, almost like in a court case, who's going to take the defense of the Jewish people. So this is a book, what? Like Moshe Rabbeinu, right, beautiful, like Moshe Rabbeinu does. Machenina misifrecha, take me out of this book. I don't want to be a part of it if you're not going to forgive the Jewish people. Beautiful. So that's Rav Kook also. And this book is all about all the different sources and different places and different viewpoints where Rav Kook is taking that position, that we need to always defend the Jewish people. Interesting, it just comes to mind that in one of the Hespedim, the eulogies, and I heard it from two different eulogies, that Rabbi Howard, when somebody said something negative about a certain group, he said, we do not do that. We do not, please stop. Do not say anything negative about that group within the Jewish people. I don't want to hear negative words. Interesting. And that's, and Rav Kook is very much a believer in that. So let's look at this following idea from Rav Kook and the way that we are to see every Jew. And the way that we are to appreciate, says Rav Kook, that there are really two aspects that are found within every Jewish soul, every Jewish person. And let's just read a few lines from Rav Kook. If we look deeply into this topic, we will see the following. There are two items, right? There are two parts that builds the holiness of every Jewish person. Vahit kashrut ha'elokit imahem, and the connection that every Jew has with God. So how is it that every Jew is connected with God? There are two ways. Ha'echad, hu sigula. The first is that there's an aspect in every Jew, what's called sigula. Now, what does sigula mean? Literally the word, and I always like to translate it the way I heard from Rav Soloveitchik, similar to the English word sigula, singular. It has basically the same letters. That there's something singular that's found within every Jew. No matter what that Jew does, no matter how that Jew behaves, no matter how the Jew acts, there's something singular within every Jew. Klomar, Teva HaKedusha Shebinishmat Yisrael Meyirushat Avot. We have within us something unique, something special that has been handed down, that's part of our, what we might call our spiritual DNA, that goes back to the forefathers. The fact that we are descendants of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, all of us have a unique DNA. And that's true also of a convert who enters Judaism as well, that they also are, they're gifted with that special DNA. Ka'amor lo b'tzidkatcha. And there's, as the verse says in the Torah, God doesn't choose us based on our righteousness. Rak be'avotecha chashak Hashem la'ava otam v'yivcha b'zaram acharei. Pasuk in Devarim that says Hashem has chosen you because you are descendants of the forefathers. Vayitem li sigula mikol amim. You're unique from all the nations of the world. V'asigula hu koach kadosh pinimi. There is within us a holiness within our soul of every single Jew. Munach B'teva hanefesh beratzon Hashem. Hashem has willed that within every Jew that there is unique holiness. That's what it means to be part of the Jewish people, that we have, every single Jew has that sigula aspect, has a unique holiness that's found in our neshama. Kamo teva kol davar b'mtziut, like everything that's created in this world, we've been created, our people, and that we're descendants of the forefathers and the mothers, that we have that unique aspect of our soul. She'i efshar lo lishtanot klal. There's no way of changing that. By the way, if a Jew says that they want to convert to another religion, is there conversion outside? Can a Jew ever leave Judaism? The halacha is no, you can never leave. There's no way out. Sorry, there is no way out of being Jewish. If you say you're Christian, if you're Muslim, according to halacha, you are not. You are a Jew. There's no way of ever removing that. Why is that? Because of this. Because of this sigula aspect, that it's part of your very essence. There's no way of changing it. Okay, that's one aspect of every Jew. And when you see your fellow Jew, you need to see that segula aspect in every Jew. Now, what's the other aspect that makes up every Jew? Vehabet, or hasheni, the second one, hu inyan bechira. That's based on the choice, based on the behavior and conduct of a Jew. Zet taloy b'masa atov v'talmud Torah. That's based on a person's observance, if they're keeping mitzvot, if they're keeping Torah. So those are two ways of looking at a Jew. Your holiness is based on a singular holiness, a teva, a natural holiness that you're born with. But then there's also holiness based on your actions, based on your observance, based on the Torah that you learn, the mitzvah that you observe. Now, here's the interesting point. Which one is more central? Which one is more defining of a Jew? What would you say? Now, often we think the other. What's the first thing we say about another Jew? Is he Shomer Shabbos? Does he wear tzitzis? Does he wear a kippah? Right? Does he keep the mitzvah? Like that's the way that we often judge. Hopefully that's not what we do, but we do a bit. We do a bit of that. That's the way we kind of like, well, who is this person? Who is this Jew? Right? Is that a Shomer Shabbos? Is that, do they wear a kippah? Do they?
It's like internal and external.
Yeah, exactly. But what is exactly? So what is most defining? What's the right? So most defining is the DNA. That's correct. So this is what Rav Kook write. Hachelek shel. Here's the key line. You can underline this. Hachelek shel hasigula. This aspect of a Jew, the sigula aspect that we have, the natural, what is the very essence that we are created with, Tselem Elokim, that we are descendants of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Hu harbe is so much more. Be'ein ora klal. There's no way of even measuring it. Yoter gadol v'kadosh me'achelek hataloi b'bechira. It's so much more central. It's so much more defining than the other. Now, both are important, and we do need to kind of make the assessment, and that's also what it means to define our own observance and our own allegiance and devotion to mitzvot. But when we look at another Jew, says Rav Kook, we need to be aware of both ideas. And if we put more emphasis on the segula aspect, then we're going to love that person more. we're going to feel an affinity. We're going to feel a closeness to that person because we're all sharing that neshama together. We're all sharing the fact that we're descendants of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Yes, please.
Like a pintle yid, every year.
Exactly right. Exactly right. This becomes a very important part of Hasidus, that pintel yid, to see that. By the way, but not only to see it and to judge it, you have the pintel yid and you have mitzvot, but Rav Kook says the pintel yid, that aspect is so much more, right? The segula aspect, the essence that you're a descendant of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and to see that. And by the way, this is what led Rav Kook to live a life where he was dedicated to bringing the chalutzim, right, the pioneers, to bring them back, and that we have to be closer with them. And in this way, we can have greater unity if we see another Jew in this light. The problem is we're judging, and often this is true in the Jewish community, we're judging the other aspects. Look at the distance that we have between us, and you don't do this, and you don't do that, and you believe that, and we believe this, and we can't really, how can we really come together? But when we see the other as really being the central point, the most important in terms of the way that we judge one another, so now we can find a common ground and to appreciate the other. Yes, please.
I think the Bechira, the reason the Bechira is smaller is because the Bechira is in the Yetzer, there's a Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Ra. So with Bechira, you've always got the struggle with this tendency to do the wrong thing. Whereas when it's something that you're born with, there's no struggle built in. Whereas in the other case, there's built-in struggle.
Yes, I agree. Very good. Yeah, please, Roseanne.
There was something on a video, a pastor came to the cartel and somebody said to him, "Are you Jewish?" He said, "No, but my mother is." And I have a beautiful story. My next door neighbor, for whatever reason, left Orthodoxy. And one Shabbos I went over and I gave him 2 candles. I said, "Shabbat Shalom," and I left. The next week I came, I said, "Did you like the candles?" He said, "Yes." I gave him another 2 candles. Since then, he started wearing a hat and a yarmulke. Here we go. You reach out to somebody. And
Absolutely right. Absolutely. But the more and Rav Kook is teaching us that the more that we see that segula aspect of how much we have in common, and also how much holiness there is in that other person. Okay, they may not be doing this, may not be doing that, they believe this, but the segula is shining, right? That aspect that they are descendants of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, they have that singular neshama, and we share that neshama together, so that is that's going to bring us closer. We can look now to page 2. And Rav Kook, one of the interesting things about Rav Kook, and sometimes there's criticism around the writings of Rav Kook, that he often does not quote sources. He writes a lot without, traditionally rabbis would always quote their sources. Rav Kook doesn't do that in his writings. It's rare that he's just writing and writing without sources. And one reason for that is, someone pointed out, that he's really not basing it on a single source. In other words, there's so many sources and everything that he knows, and he's bringing all that together, and he doesn't want to limit it to a source, because if you go to that one source and you see it, well, it's not really that source, it's that, and the Zohar, and that Midrash, and that Psikta, and all of that is why Rav Kook is writing the following. Okay, but here Rav Kook does source something, and to me I found that interesting. I wanted to see the source. So Rav Kook quotes from a sefer, which you may not be familiar with. It's not that well known, called Yisod V'Shorash Avoda. It was written by Alexander Ziskin Mehorodna. This is in the 1700s. He died in 1794. And it's a book about mitzvot. It's a book about the spirituality and the meaning of mitzvot. Interesting, Art Scroll just translated this book a few years ago, so obviously they thought it was worthy of a translation. Very interesting sefer, and Rav Kook quotes from this sefer, and it's in a letter of Rav Kook. If you look at the very top, number 1, Harav Be'igeret. Rav Kook, in a letter in Igrot Haraya, he writes the following: Ve'ashrei Adam, happy is the person, or praiseworthy is the person, shezikech nishmato, when a person purifies their neshama, begedushat ha-mitzvah, with the holiness of the mitzvah of b'tzedek tishpot et amitecha. Now, what mitzvah is that referring to? That's what we started with this morning. What mitzvah is referring to? He says, how beautiful it is when a person purifies their life in such a way that they have mastered the mitzvah of b'tzedek tishpot amitecha. What mitzvah is that? Of judging others, that's right. That when you see another person, that you're not judging harshly, that you're judging positively. And we're so often we make that judgment and already making, why did he do this? And why is he dressing this way? And why did she say that? So the mitzvah is to see positivity and to see the other person in a positive light. And Rav Kook says how beautiful that is when we do that, when we bring that into our life. And then he says, K'mivu'ar b'yesod v'shoresh avoda. And he quotes from this book, from the Sefer, where he speaks about the importance of this mitzvah. So here is just a few lines from the Sefer, Yisod v'shoresh avoda. And it's just in the, if you want to follow along with me, where it's in bold, just 2 lines down. Tedu ne'emana. He says that you should know this is now reading from the Sefer Yisod v'shoresh avoda. Tedu ne'emana. You should know the following. And ne'emana means the person who is living a life and pursuing a life of righteousness. She'i afshar she'yavo hadam letachlit avoda zu hashorashit va'ikarit hanal. A person cannot attain this high level, and it is a high level, by the way. It's not an easy thing to do. To always see the other person, to see your neighbor, to see your family, to see your relatives, always in a positive light, always seeing them in positivity. Said not easy to do that. Im lo kishiyargil et asmo lekayem b'tmidut shtei mitzvot aseh klaliyut shebetorah hakdosha. There are 2 mitzvot that you always have to be aware of in order to fulfill and to attain this level. Ha'achat ha'mitzvot aseh shel v'ahavta l'recha kamocha. We have a mitzvah that says you should love your fellow person as yourself, which means that you should extend that love and that understanding the way that you would want that for yourself, that you should do it for somebody else. U'be'emet amar la Rabbi Akiva, and we all know Rabbi Akiva said, Zeh klal gadol b'Torah. This is one of the foundational principles of the Torah. V'hashniyat luyaba. And this second mitzvah is actually connected or related to this mitzvah. V'hi mitzvat aseh shel b'tzedek tishpot amitacha, judging others favorably. U'shneim nemru b'parsha kadoshim ki kadosh yomar lo. Both of these mitzvot are found in which parsha? Parsha Kedoshim. What is Parsha Kedoshim? How to become a kadosh, how to become a holy person. How do you become a holy person? And here's the chiddush of the Yisod v'shoresh avoda. We often think of the Hevei Dana Kol Dam L'Kafskus as a separate mitzvah. He says it's really an extension of Ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha. What does it mean to love another person? I mean, how do you define that? How does that play out? What does it mean to love another person? So one way that plays out, loving another person means that you give the benefit of the doubt to the other person. In other words, this mitzvah of b'tzedek tishpot amitecha is really an extension. It's really part of what it means to love somebody else. You know, if your child, or maybe a good example, your grandchild broke a vase in your living room, so how would you react?
It's just
It's okay, right? I don't know, if somebody else walked in your house and did that, you wouldn't necessarily be that forgiving. But for somebody that you love, right, ve'ahavta, then you're going to be done the kafskus. Then you're going to find a way to be forgiving. You're going to find a way to look the other way. So that's not only true of a grandchild or a child that breaks the vase, that's supposed to be true of every Jew and every person. Here we're focusing on Ahavat Yisrael, the way that we love our fellow Jew. The way that we love our fellow Jew is to give that benefit of the doubt, to see the best, to be forgiving. And that's these 2 mitzvot, says the Sefer, Yisod v'shoresh avoda, really go hand in hand. They're really part of one mitzvah. What does it mean to love? To love is always to see, Hevei Dan et kol adam, is to give that benefit of the doubt. Sometimes it means looking the other way. Sometimes it just means seeing that the positivity, even though there's that negative part to see, but I'm going to choose to see the good and highlight the good in that other person. And by the way, I know from my personal life, I love being around people that are positive. I think we all know that, right? Just have positive things to say, and you look great today, and that's a great outfit, and that's not, it's nice. And it's actually a mitzvah. It becomes a mitzvah. That's part of this love and extending a good word and lifting up the other person. And you could easily be that person and say, well, why are you wearing that? And why did you? Or why this? Or why that? Or to be the person of Hevei Dana Kol Adam or Chaver Chalakavskos. Yes?
I think we also mentioned anyways Hashem.
Yes, beautiful.
Hashem, we both judge it favorably, grants us mercy in his eyes.
Absolutely, very nice. Hashem kol rachum v'chanun. Hashem is also is merciful and looks the other way. Noseat Avon, that he lifts our sin. Okay, let's go to page. We're going to come back. Yeah, please. Yes.
Difficult question maybe, but
Yeah, please.
is it also right if you don't really mean it?
I think so. If you don't really mean it, I mean that's like the mitoch shelo lishma ba lishma idea. You don't mean it, but you have to train yourself. Maybe it's a way of training yourself, and hopefully you'll get there where you will mean it. But this is the kind of thing that even if you don't mean it, it's good. If you don't really mean to give tzedakah to somebody else with all the right kavana, does it work? If I give $100 and but I don't really have the most sincere, does the person receive the $100? They receive it. They get the tzedakah. So yeah, ideally kavana is good, but in cases like this, when you're accomplishing something, so it's a good idea just to accomplish it, even if all the kavana is not necessarily there. Yes.
And these two are mitzvot aseh, correct?
Mitzvah aseh, yes.
So that's also, because we always view the mitzvot aseh as negative. You can't,
Right.
you can't. This is a positive mitzvah, even in its identification. It's a positive mitzvah.
Yes.
To create positivity.
Very nice. A positive mitzvah that's all about positivity. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, let's go to page 3. We'll come back to that source in just a few minutes. And this is one of my favorite teachings of Rav Kook. A favorite just a short vort, so to speak, of Rav Kook. And by the way, we can ask the question, well, how do we do this? We're saying, like, how do we get to the point, and what are some of the things that we can do in order to appreciate others and to be more loving, to be more caring, and to be positive towards others? I think this idea could be very helpful. This is a Gemara that's found in the Gemara Brachos. It's Daf Chav Zayin. There's a whole discussion that's going on there in terms of Mariv, of the evening service, and if it's an obligation or not an obligation. And at some point, the rabbis turn to one another and they say, well, all the rabbis are not here in the Beis Medrash yet. Let's wait for all the rabbis to come and we'll continue this conversation. That's the background of the Gemara. And the Gemara uses the following term. Page 3, very top. It says, Hamtein, like, let's wait. Ad shi kansu. Let's wait until all the rabbis come in. But they're called the Balei Trisin. Let's wait until the Balei Trisin that they enter the Beis Medrash, right? So they're very good. So Balei Trisin. Now that's the term that the Gemara uses for the rabbis, for the sages, for those that are going to argue this point in the Beis Medrash. Let's wait until the Balei Trisin enter. What is Balei Trisin? How does it translate literally? Balei Trisin, Balei mean the masters of Trisim. Now what are Trisim? I don't see them here, but we all know what Trisim shades, right? It means a shield, or it means a guard, the Balei Trisim. So Rav Kook says something very beautiful here. Rav Kook says, how did the rabbis argue in the Beis Medrash? They argued in such a way that they were just guarding, they were shielding their position. When they argued with one another, they weren't there to bring down the other or to attack the other. Now that's a very important point when it comes to how we discuss or how we argue a point with one another. Do we argue a point that we're defending our position, or do we argue that it kind of leaves that place and we're belittling the other and belittling the other person? And there's a very, very important distinction there. So Rav Kook says, and I just want to read the last few lines here from this piece. This is from Einaya. He writes the following, Shigam, the last, if you wanted to see the words of Rav Kook, last word in the line, 4 lines up, Shigam. Shigam da'at zulato. The opinion of the other person who de'ah shlema, right? That other person who's arguing the point. This is true in a Beis Medrash. And by the way, this is true also at a Shabbos table or getting together with people, and people are arguing a point and they're at different positions. And Rav Kook says, you know what? The other position has validity as well. Shigam da'at zulato hi de'ah shlema u'makor kadosh hi novat, and it comes from a holy place. He's referring specifically here, maybe in the Beis Medrash, but it may be true again in any discussion or argument we may have about politics, or whatever it may be, that people sincerely, authentically believe in this position. I believe in this position, and we argue that point. That's Shivan Panim Torah. There are 70 different facets of the Torah. There are different ways of looking at life. We all come from different backgrounds. We're different people. There are different ways of looking at things. And to appreciate that, Al Kain Nikru'u Tamidei Chachamim Hamitaskim Ki'ilu Havichuchim Ba'alei Trisin. He says that they argued in such a way that they were just guarding their position. The rabbis were not out to belittle the other, to bring down the other. Tofse Magain. They were just tofes, meaning they held on to their shield. And that's how we need when we discuss with others and when we argue with others. It has to be that. It has to be, okay, we're defending our position. That's the tris, right? I'm shielding my position. That I can do, but never that I go on the offensive, right? Not that I'm taking out the sword, right? You shield, but not that you're taking out the sword and trying to take down the other, trying to diminish the other. So that's a very beautiful way of understanding the word Balei Trisin. And here I found something which is very, very interesting. I think about Rav Kook and the influences of Rav Kook. One of the great influence is the Netziv of Volozhin. He was his Rebbe when he studied in Volozhin as a young man. The Netziv wrote a famous work, Hamek Davar, which is one of the classic works in the Torah. And I came across the following pasuk with the interpretation of the Netziv. And this is where, in the Torah, Breshit, we're going to come to this in a few weeks, where Avraham and Sarah are arguing. They are arguing. What were they arguing? They're arguing what to do about their son, Yishmael. What do we do? Right? What do we do about this son? Does he stay home? Do we find another place for him? It's not really appropriate that he's around Yitzchak. He's a bad influence in the home. And they don't agree on the matter. Husband and wife, we sometimes disagree with one another. So the pasuk says, Beinecha lanara v'almatecha kol asher tomari lecha Sarah. Hashem ultimately has to step in. Maybe we need that once in a while. We don't really have that schus today, but Hashem to tell us what to do. Hashem steps in, and this is a famous line, and says, Kol asher tomar elecha Sarah, whatever Sarah tells you, Avraham, shema bekola. Listen to her. Listen to what Sarah has to say. And this becomes an important lesson for husbands, right? Whenever there's an argument, listen to what the wife is saying. But here, I want to just point out this really a beautiful insight. So this is the Netziv of Volozhin. He writes, why does the pasuk not say Shema lekola, to her voice? What's bekola? Now, there's another pasuk in the Torah, and also when Sarah and Avram are speaking, it says lekola. Here it says bekola. What's bekola? Now, by the way, just translate, what is it? Lekola is to her voice. What's bekola? It could be with, in her. Good. It's more okay. It could be with or in her voice. Now look at what the Netziv writes. The lo amar shma lekola. It doesn't say in the pasuk listen to her voice. Shema shma'uchi ya'aseh kidareh. That means just listen to what she has to say. Those you don't agree, just listen to her. That's lekola. Kilashon hamikra le'el ve'ishma Avraham lekol sarai. Actually, and he quotes another verse where it says lekol sarai. Okay, avol bekola. What does bekola mean? Mashma'o. The meaning is sheyidaktek v'yidbonen bidvareha. You should try to be very careful. Yidaktek v'yidbonen, and you should analyze. You should look closely at what she's saying. According to the Netziv, what is Hashem telling Avraham? Not just listen to her, right? Be quiet already, just listen to your wife. That's not the way to read the pasuk. The pasuk is, I want you to listen more carefully and to think about what she is saying. I want you to analyze, I want you to see her side of this as well. Now, you may still disagree at the end, and I'm telling you, listen to Sarah. But what you need to do is take a step back or maybe a step forward. We say like lean in, right? Maybe to lean in a little bit and to listen more and to be more, to analyze more closely her position, to be open to what she is saying. A really fascinating way of reading this pasuk. Not lekola, but bikola. And this becomes, I think, a very important point in thinking about arguments or disagreement with other Jews, or with family, with friends, whatever it may be, that the Netziv and Rav Kook is teaching us that we need, first of all, that we're only shielding. It's never about taking down the other, and the importance of also listening to the other side. And I'll just mention this, it's become like a little bit of a hesped to some degree for Rabbi Hauer. Listening to all the hespedim, what I heard again and again And I'll just one story. This is Nathan Diamond, actually a friend of mine from high school. He's worked the last 30 years for the OU. He oversees the office in Washington, all the political affairs of the OU, which there's a lot in that area, meeting with senators and congressmen and the president and so on. And the first meeting that they had together, Nathan Diamond and Rabbi Hauer, so they met with one another for the very first time. Again, the head of the OU with Nathan Diamond, who's overseeing the office in Washington. And Nathan Diamond, he writes this he wrote an article, a eulogy. He said, all the other leaders that I met with when they came in of the OU and other leaders, they come in and they tell me what their agenda is. In other words, that's how we begin a meeting here. In other words, the one who's leading the organization is telling in this case, Nathan Diamond, telling him what it is that we believe in, what you need to do. Rabbi Hauer sat down and he said, you tell me what I need to learn. Tell me the books that I need to read, like how to understand what it is that you do. That was the first thing that Rabbi Hauer said to him. It wasn't his agenda. It wasn't telling this fellow, Nathan Diamond, what it is that he would like, but rather I'm here to learn and I am open and I want to hear what you have to say. So this is exactly what the Netziv is saying here as well. And even this argument, Hashem is telling Avram, what I want you to do is Shema b'kola. Listen another time, right? Listen more carefully to what she's saying, to her side of the argument. You may not agree at the end, right? You may still disagree, but I want you to try to appreciate her position. And then, okay, whatever decision needs to be made, we need to make that, but with a little bit more understanding. Okay, yes, please.
That meant that you should do what she says.
Do it, what's that?
When it says listen.
Well, it does mean that, do what she said, but the Netziv is pointing out there's more to it.
Listen and be attentive, but do what she said.
Okay, no, yes. Yes, I mean, that's what I said. Ultimately, you're going to have to listen to Sarah. That's what God steps in and says her decision is going to be the right decision. But there's a big difference between just saying, okay, I got to listen to you, and that's God, and just walk away and slam the door. Okay, I'm going to, that's your side, that's my side. Or to say, okay, let me try to appreciate your position. Let me try to appreciate your side. I may disagree, and I may fully disagree, but let me try to see a little bit more of your side. And that again, just that one letter, the difference between bikola and likola. Bikola, to hear a little bit, God is saying, take another moment or two to hear it, and how important that is, and what a difference that can make, even when we disagree. Yes, Roseanne.
Last week, we learned that Asa Connector.
Yeah.
Sometimes in order to be Asa, you have to be connected.
Okay.
Sarah was connected, but he had to listen to her.
Yes. Again, but there's a difference between listening and just agreeing with that other person because you're kind of forced into agreeing, and a sense of understanding the other side, even where you may not be fully on the same page. Yes.
I think likola is external, rikola is internal.
Exactly.
It's to
Exactly right.
not to listen, but to integrate.
Very nice. Very nice. Well said. Integrate, to try to more deeply appreciate her position. And again, as I said, doesn't necessarily mean you agree. Doesn't mean you're going to agree fully, but to appreciate the other side, and there's a big difference here. Yes. Yes. Yeah. That's right. Milchemet Magain means that you're just protecting your position, right? Magain, lahagain, means you are protecting your position. The other is that you're going on the offensive. And we have to be very careful that when we sit down with others, and again, Rabbi Hauer comes to mind because there's so much of what they spoke about is when he sat down with others, that he was open to hearing the other side. It does not mean that you agree. There was a eulogy that was written by the head of the Reform movement, and his name is Rick Jacob, and he wrote, and the headline is, I lost my chavruta, referring to Rabbi Hauer. They never really learned together, but they spoke a lot together. And again, this is an Orthodox rabbi from Ner Yisrael, and the openness that he had to see the other side and to hear the other side, to appreciate the segula aspect, the holiness of that person. We can disagree. And he writes in this article, Rick Jacob, you can look it up, We disagreed on just about everything. A Reform rabbi and this Orthodox, we disagreed on just about everything. But Magain means that I shield my position.
Inside.
It means I have my position, right? I have mine, but I'm not going on the offense. It's not to try to tear you down. That's the tagai. That's the other side. And that's, again, there's such an important nuanced difference between what it means to argue in a way that you begin to attack the other, which again, we're always, we fall into that, we fall into that trap at times. You have to be very, very careful that when you're arguing a point that it should never become personal, right? Never become personal. So that's very, very important. Okay. Yes, please.
Every time I read this question, I've always focused on the word shema.
Yeah.
Shema means to take to heart. Listen with your heart.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what is the command is take to heart.
Yeah.
And my understanding is that don't just think about the situation, not just he's your son, and you don't want to throw your son out, but think about the whole thing in depth from many different perspectives.
Okay.
And I know that he's not my son, and I'm not speaking because he's not my son, he's your son, but rather there's a real essence here going on. Hear the essence, and that's what is good for love. Get inside of it.
Good.
Not from the outside.
Very nice. Very nice. All right. 2 last points. We'll finish in the next 3 minutes. 2 points. One is, I think about Rav Kook. When I think about the life of Rav Kook, the idea of Ahavat Yisrael is first and foremost in his life and his teachings. How important it was for himself, and how important it was to impart this idea to the Jewish people. He was one of the Gedolei Torah, one of the greatest minds and the greatest spiritual personalities of the last 100 years. There's another great spiritual personality of the last 100 years. Again, there's a handful of the giants, if we just think about the last 100 years. And one of them is Lubavitcher Rebbe. I think everybody here would agree, and the Jewish world would agree, that when we think about giants, spiritual rabbinic figures who had a tremendous impact. And one of the most important teachings of Lubavitcher Rebbe is Ahavat Yisrael. That's what he's training all of his Hasidim to do. Go to Alaska, go to Spain, go to Montana, go everywhere in the world, open up shop and love Jews and love every Jew. No matter if they're keeping Shabbos, they're not keeping Shabbos, they have this segula. They have a soul that's an Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov's soul that you need to invite in. And if you put a pair of tefillin on them, that soul's going to light up. And if you can convince a woman to light candles Friday night, their soul is going to light up because that soul is already a soul that's segula, that's a singular soul. So that's just interesting. 2 great personalities that are emphasizing this point, how important this point is about Yisrael. I have just the last page. There's a new book that just came out called Engaging the Essence a year or 2 ago by Yosef Bronstein. If you're interested in the philosophy of Lubavitcher Rebbe, this is one of the greatest, a great book, one of the greatest books. The name of the book, it's on the last page. It's called Engaging the Essence, the Torah Philosophy of Lubavitcher Rebbe by Rabbi Yosef Bronstein. And okay, now we come to the last point that I want to make. And here Rav Kook says one other important point when it comes to Ahavat Yisrael. So for generations after generations, from the time of Avram until today, Ahavat Yisrael is so central, so important to Jewish life and the way we need to think about others and community. But Rav Kook is going to add one more point, and that is that when we're coming back to the land of Israel, and again, for Rav Kook, it's always Israel becomes such an important part of his philosophy, how much more important it is for us to have Achdus, how important it is for us to have Ahavat Yisrael. And let me just read one line from Rav Kook. This is on page 2. We skipped this earlier. I just want to come back to this. Page 2. And this is from a work called the Shmona Kvatzim. It's in Hebrew and in English. I'm just going to read one sentence. You can look at it in the Hebrew or the English, whatever you like. Ohavei Yisrael be'emet. Those that love Jews truthfully in a real way. And he's speaking to all of us that we need to increase our love for every Jew. Shenafsham tzme'a l'tshuat Hashem. And Jews that have a yearning, that are waiting for the salvation of the Jewish people, for redemption, for Mashiach. Ulebinyan Eretz Yisrael. And those Jews that want to build this land of Israel, build a nation here in the land of Israel, Heim notim klape chesed lakol. They're always looking for kindness, to be more kind, that there should be more kindness towards every Jew. Umelamdim schus, and here's that word again, to be melamed schus, to see the schus al kol haposhim, even for the sinners, to see the best. in every individual, even those quote unquote who are the sinners. And why is it so important? Because we're building a nation. You know what? Ahavat Yisrael is important. It is. If everybody's kind of living in their own place in the four corners of the world, all right, I'm in this shul here, I'm living in Hong Kong, I'm in Australia, Ahavat Yisrael. It's important, very, very important. But how about when we're all living in the same house together? When we're living in the same house, it's harder also. That's right. It's easier when this group is in Australia, this group is in Hong Kong, and this one's in LA, and this one's in New York. But now we're all sharing the same house. So first of all, maybe it's a little bit harder. I think that's a good point. But it's so much more important that we have Ahavat Yisrael because we're living together. We're building a family together. We're building a nation. We can't just close the door and pretend that they're not there. We all need to work together. So Rav Kook says Ahavat Yisrael becomes that much more important now that we're in the land of Israel. We need to see the segula. We need to see the goodness in everyone. We need to highlight how great the soldiers are. We need to highlight how great those that are learning. We need to highlight those that are bringing this economy to a world-class economy. We need to see the best in everyone and the contributions that they're making and to build everybody up. And the segula, to see this, the singularity, the holiness that's found in every single Jew. Yes?
I think there's such a fine line between Bagay the Hagara, and that makes it difficult because very often you feel that you're just protecting
Yeah,
Barney
yeah.
and going on the offensive in order to guard. So that's a
Okay, it is a fine line. It is a fine line. It is a fine line. I mean, it doesn't mean that we can never say, a negative word. We can never be critical. It can't possibly mean that. The question is always how it's said, and if it's said in a loving way, and if it's said in a way that we see the goodness and the potential in the other. That's the essence. That's the main point. That's what Rav Kook is teaching us. I just want to end with the following, just one quick and one last word about Rabbi Hauer. Again, this is very much, in the air in the OU community, and we've really been I would say a little bit of trauma, in a feeling of trauma of losing such a critical and important leader and very, very special person. So I'll just end with the following. The other, one other point that they spoke about for Rabbi Hauer. By the way, you'll see there's pictures of Rabbi Hauer and a little bit about his life in the Torah tidbits that was just printed today or early this morning. He was a great lover of the land of Israel, He was putting a lot of effort into the Jewish community here, and he did not live here. He lived in Baltimore. He was a rabbi in Baltimore for about 30 years, and the last 5.5 years he was working with the OU, heading up the OU. He was still living in Baltimore at the time, and he was a rabbi of a shul in Baltimore, very beloved. And here it brings us to the story. So every year on Simchas Torah, they would give Rabbi Hauer the Chatan Torah, the last Aliyah. And some shuls have that custom that the rabbi of the shul receives the last Aliyah, the Torah. So every year he received that Aliyah, the Chatan Torah. And again, this was told in a couple of the eulogy, the Aspedim, that every year he'd be called up for the Aliyah. In that last Aliyah is the story of Moshe. And Moshe was also his name, Moshe Hauer, of Moshe. And the pasuk in the Torah was how Moshe came to the mountaintop and God said to Moshe, you can only see the land of Israel from a distance, that you cannot enter, you will not enter the land of Israel. And whenever they read that pasuk, Rabbi Hauer would begin to cry. And everyone would see that he would break down when that pasuk was read, that Moshe Rabbeinu can only see Eretz Yisrael from a distance and will not enter the land of Israel. And he was crying because of the love and the longing for the land of Israel. He always spoke about the importance of coming to Israel. Gosh, also in one of the Aspedim, and I'll end with this, on Parshat Lech Lecha, which will be next Shabbos. So he always got up year in and year out, and he would turn to the congregation. Says, this morning we're reading about Lech Lecha, Avram going to the land of Israel, and he would turn to everyone and said, you are sinning, and you are sinning, and you are sinning, and I am sinning, that we are here in Baltimore, that we're here in Chutz La'aretz, and that we're not in the land of Israel. And he loved the land of Israel. He longed for the land of Israel. And Rav Kook says this achdus, how important it is, especially as we're coming back to the land of Israel. All of us should be zocha to it, but it's the work that we need to do as well. The constant work to judge others favorably, to see the best in others, and to bring a real Ahavat Yisrael, a real love and a bonding of Am Yisrael here in Eretz Yisrael. Let me just stop here because I'm over time, but I'm happy to take questions. Yes.